You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show here on a Friday night. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to have a great conversation. If you're watching this now, please stick around because we're going to have some great questions and great discussion. And if you could share it around for us, that'd be great as well. So, as you can see, it's just me today. It's my face on the screen. Not for too long because I'm going to bring tonight's guest on as quickly as I can so we can have a real good conversation about her book and all things writing. Aga is on holiday at the moment, which is very nice for him. He would obviously love to be here, and commiserations. He sends his apologies for not being here, but he's busy putting a tent up in Wales. So good luck to you, Aga, doing that. And I'm sure you'll watch this back and have a good chat with us. But hello to people watching. Hello, Anya. Thank you very much for tuning in. Again, already talked a little bit about tonight's guest. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm guessing it's going to be emotional in parts as well. And you know, on this show, we love those moments where we dig deep into mental health and perseverance and strength. So tonight's show is definitely going to be no different on that front. So I'm going to bring tonight's guest on. So I don't have to look at my own face for this amount of time. But tonight's guest is a brilliant author, a writer of a memoir as well, which we've not had for a while. I love it when people talk about their own lives and write about their own lives. So Laura Gaddis, she wrote a memoir called Mosaic, and we're going to chat all about that tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, Chris would do a better intro, but I'm not great at that. I'm good at questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Laura Gaddis to the show.
Hi, thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you. Sorry about the introduction. As I've said,
okay.
not the best at them. I have to run all the technology and work all that out. It still baffles me every time I try and do it by myself. But thank you so much for joining us. People in the comments, obviously, if you're watching this live with us, feel free to stick around to the end where you get to ask some questions about all things writing, or maybe you're struggling with writing a memoir yourself, or you've got a great story to tell and you want some really good advice, or maybe you've had similar experiences to Laura and you want advice in that route. But stick with us to the end and you have the opportunity to ask those questions. So, Laura, the first thing we do on the show, I'm going to stick with Agate's little trend. He always asks, where in the world are you coming from, and what's the writing scene like in that part of the world?
Yeah, so I live in Ohio. It's the state of Ohio in the United States. Where I am actually is a tiny kind of college town. So the writing scene in my town is maybe not the most hopping, although I do try to create community classes. I do creative writing for the community just to give them, because there are a lot of writers here. There's just not a lot of opportunity. Mm-hmm. But we are close to Cincinnati, which is a much more vibrant city with a lot more opportunities for literary people and bookstores and such. So yeah, it's overall, it's fine.
Nice. Obviously, getting involved in the community and setting up workshops and the things for people to get involved in. How does that impact your writing on the day-to-day, like seeing other people actively doing it? Does that help your writing process at all? Or?
It does a lot, actually. So I work with a lot of different writers, and I think all of it helps. So I teach at the university here in our town. I teach a lot of composition classes, but also creative writing. And also this semester I'm doing a popular literature. We get to delve into one genre. I picked post-apocalyptic for some reason. And then I work with the community. So they write memoirs, I have fantasy writers, I have sci-fi writers, I have graphic novelists. And then I do book coaching, which again, I get a variety, and it's very inspiring actually. And it makes, especially when I teach my community classes, I give them writing activities and I do them too. And we do them together and we all chat and I learn from all of them. It's actually pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that does sound brilliant. Normally, when we ask that question, like, what's the writing scene like? We don't, even though everyone who comes on the show is an author normally, we don't tend to get answers like that where you're working so much in partnership with others and helping others and, reading each other's work and giving advice and tips and guidance. So that must be really fulfilling for you as well on a personal level.
It is. It really is. And some of the classes actually have evolved more into like a critique group. I've had a kind of a core group of writers in the community that are working on their own books, and they really like gelled within themselves, and they like talk. So it's been very, very good opportunity for me to see that and to learn from them, because they have ideas that I would never think of, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And how is teaching popular fiction as well, like diving into that, on the day job, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's going to be new for me. I'm just kind of actually prepping that class now, but I could have picked memoir. I didn't think that a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old college kids would enjoy memoir as much as I do. So that's why I went with post-apocalyptic kind of dystopian novels, especially post-COVID. It seemed maybe like a
Mm.
topic that's fresh for them. But I am going to really angle it, even though it's a literature course, toward like the lens of a writer and how we look at genre and the genre conventions and what is in these books and what maybe is bending the genre a little bit, and have them try their hand at writing it as well. So I thought that would be a fun way to take that class.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a brilliant class that loads of people would probably love to be involved in. What goes into creating a class like that when you're thinking about the construction of what it's going to look like?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times there's especially with the university classes, and this one's pretty open-ended, but there's certain projects, certain kinds of writing that they have to do, certain critical thinking skills that I have to touch on. This literature course, though, is one of the more open. That one and the creative writing that I do, the intro to creative writing, are probably the most broad and open, and I can kind of play with it as I like. So I really just like to show them a variety of things. I'm throwing in Sweet Tooth, which is a graphic novel, which was my husband's recommendation. I'm not the graphic novel person of the house, but I thought, well, how fun would it be to read a bunch, like, 3 novels and then read a graphic novel and compare those things. So there's a lot of flexibility, and I think it'll hopefully be fun. We'll see.
Yeah, no, definitely. People in the comments are already saying that sounds like a fun genre. And
Yeah.
Anya also says, I've examined some memoirs in some of her classes, and her students tend to enjoy Trevor Noah's Born a Crime.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's another little memoir potentially for people to look at. But as fascinating as the day job sounds, and I'm sure those creative writing courses would be absolutely brilliant, and the seminar that you've created sounds fantastic as well. But we always start with the road to writing. So I'm going to play a little video, and then we're going to find out how writing became something in your life, and how you got to where you currently are. So this is the first video. So, Laura, if you can take us back to that first memory that you have of writing becoming something that you wanted to do, and how you took the journey to do it.
Yeah, my journey, and this isn't, I don't think, unusual for a lot of writers, but it wasn't a direct journey, and I took a lot of detours, different careers, and now here I am. I remember liking English a lot as a kid, and I remember taking classes, like summer classes, and just doing like short story writing, and I always thought that was a lot of fun. I actually still have some of those little books I made as a kid laying around. Even in high school, I was very good at English and language in particular, and playing with words and stuff. But I also really liked psychology. So when I got to college, I actually majored in psychology and Spanish. And I tried English. I took about 1 English class just to be sure, and I loved it. But I was like, psychology is more practical. I'm going to do that. So I went on to finish that. I got a master's in clinical psychology, and I worked in the field for 14 years in various things. I did work in special ed, high school. I worked in hospitalization programs with children. I was a licensed therapist. And I think I did neuropsych testing. And I got to a point where 2 things happened, I guess. One, I got a little burnt out. Psychology is a tough field. I love it. I think it's fascinating. It plays a big role in my book now, but it's hard. It's a really tough field to be in. And 2, that's when we moved here for my husband to take his job at the university. and I had to leave my job, and I was kind of at a crossroads, and I'm like, well, this might be an opportunity to go back to that writing thing that I really liked. And they have a great MFA program at the university here. And it took me a couple years to get in, but I got in. And that's really where I just kind of went full time with the writing and the teaching writing. And I haven't really looked back, to be honest.
So what was it like then? Obviously, going from writing short stories as a kid and enjoying, creative fiction in that sense, to then going, do you know what, I'm going to study this. I'm going to make it something that I'm going to do as a career and a choice as an adult. What were the differences and challenges that you faced doing those things?
It's definitely very challenging to make it a career, because unlike psychology, that was a little bit more of like a clear career path, right? Like you graduate, so even undergrad, there are things you can do. And then I thought, okay, now I'm gonna go to grad school. And then there were jobs that, I can get the licensure, and it was very clear. This is not clear. I'm still unclear about what I'm doing half the time. I'm trying to piece it together. That's why I feel like I have about 5 jobs at the same time, teaching various places and writing and whatnot. But it's, it also just evolved from the fiction stories to nonfiction, because while I was working in psychology, I also blogged a lot when blogging. I don't know if blogging's still a thing, but maybe back in 2010 or so, I started a blog. And that's actually when this book, Mosaic, begins. Like in a way, there's times where it starts and then that's elements of that got pulled in. So that's when I started writing more nonfiction, and people were responding very positively to the blog. And I didn't expect, that was the first time I shared my writing, and it snowballed from there into the book I have.
Do you think the blogging process then really helped you in terms of giving you the encouragement that you needed to sort of find your feet in writing? And I know this is something that a lot of authors talk about in terms of finding their voice. Do you think that helped you grow into the writer that you are today and the eventual finished book?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It gave me a platform that was totally open. And the fact that, it was kind of one of the newer things in the time in 2010, where you could share your work pretty easily with a pretty big audience. Social media was starting to pick up, so I'd put it on Facebook at the time, and I was gaining a lot of readers in a pretty easy way. Very little oversight, and it really gave me a chance to work on, especially writing short pieces, short, complete pieces, right? And something that like made sense to other people, and it wasn't just my own diary that was hidden away. I had to write it for other people, and I did that for many years, and I do think it helped me formulate, especially the format that I wrote. Mosaic is kind of still in that mode of these small essays all put together. So definitely I think that skill developed during that time.
Take us back, if you can, in terms of going through that process, because I can imagine, I've done a little tiny bit of blog writing in the past, but normally you take in the thing that's happened to you and the experience that you've had, you're thinking about it. Obviously, you've got your academic background as well in terms of psychology, and maybe you're analyzing that a little bit. But then you have to take that experience and maybe package is the wrong word, but you are trying to make it universal to as many people as possible. So you're removing that sort of a layer of personality there, because you're trying to appeal to more people in your writing. So what's that like in terms of when you go, oh, I've got an idea for this, I'm going to write about this, I think it will resonate with people, I think they'll enjoy reading about it and get something from it, but then actually crafting that, what's that process like?
Yeah, that's a really great distinction, I guess, between journaling and blogging and an actual memoir, and what memoir should be doing versus what journaling and blogging often does, which is just kind of saying, hey, this thing happened to me. Whereas you want to turn it outward and include the reader. You want the reader to feel like they can see a bit of themselves in your story, even though they don't even know who you are. So I probably took me a while to figure out how to do that, especially when a lot of things I wrote were soon after the events happened. The emotions were still raw, like without that space and time to reflect back. I think it's a lot harder to write in a way that you can turn that outward and like make other people see themselves in it. But yeah, I do think maybe over time I've I thought a lot about that. Going through the MFA program definitely helped. I mean, I did, and a lot of writers have this story as well, but I did write a full memoir manuscript years before Mosaic came out, and it never got published. One essay of it is actually in Mosaic right now because I couldn't let it go. I just loved it. But I think that was maybe part of that problem of that book, was that it was too turned into me and not outward enough. And I had to learn how to use form and metaphor and even incorporate statistical things and facts and stories I heard about other people, and incorporate that into my story in a seamless way so it didn't feel disjointed, but that allowed the reader to be like, oh, this isn't just about her. This is about people, because a lot of people deal with a lot of the issues in my book.
Yeah. And we do have the second part of the show, which is what's the story. It's very hard to talk about memoir without bringing up some of the themes and the topics and stuff. But I suppose the question linked to it, like, what when you started out writing the blog, what do you think you were trying to, and again, achieve is probably not the right word, but what were you doing in terms of like, why did you take that step into a public forum to share the experiences that you'd had, and why did you decide to do it in the written format, as opposed to going to speak to people or setting up groups? Because obviously you mentioned about setting up community groups for writers, and you could have quite easily done that in a sort of public space where you were talking to people. So why did you make that decision, and what was that like?
So at the time, I would say I was not great at speaking to groups or speaking, like which is a lot of anxiety and stuff. And I've especially being a teacher, that kind of kills it. And you start just to get used to it, normalizes presenting and speaking to people and such. So I'm much better now than I was back in 2010 when I started the blog. And again, I think language just always came easy, and written language came easy to me. Playing with words and putting it on a page, even formulating like a blog post, I never thought that hard about how to have a beginning, middle, end, how to tell a story. And so I think it was just an easy way for me to do that. It felt natural. So that was kind of my entry point. Why I started blogging at all, though, I think is actually kind of fascinating. I keep thinking about this to myself. I didn't want to forget for myself. I didn't want to forget the things, because when you go through trauma, you go through difficult times, in the moment, it's very real and visceral. And then over time, it fades. Memory is faulty and it disappears. And I didn't want to lose that. So I'm like, I'm going to start writing these things as memories come to me, and things that happened a week ago, I'm going to document it. And then it'll always be there. And I think it's actually my husband that recommended, when I told him that I turn it into a blog. He's like, well, maybe other people might like it. And that didn't bother me at all. Like, to share my writing didn't bother me at all. It still doesn't. People always ask, well, how do you write memoir? How do you share such personal things? And I that's not a scary thing to me. And I never has been. So I think that's how it all came to be. Like, I was a writer at heart, and I wanted to document everything, and I didn't mind sharing. So it kind of lends itself well to a blog.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's incredibly brave and powerful thing to do in terms of, writing a memoir. As we've said before, we've not had many people on that have done that. And I think one of the reasons for that is a lot of people are not so willing to share some of their most traumatic experiences in their life on a page. Even though you've kind of got that layer of being removed from it, because you've written it on the page. And I'm guessing when I've done it before, you can kind of just, you write it, you're happy with it, and then you send it off, and you kind of forget about it, even though people are coming to it and they're reading it and maybe they're commenting on it and things like that. So I suppose the question there that I'm trying to get to is, how did you know that you were brave enough to be writing about the trauma in your life and sharing that with other people? And what was that like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I don't know if I have the best answer for it. Because I when I teach just memoir classes, especially in the community, and we have discussions about this, I can see it in my students. I can see the ones who are not afraid to just put it on the page. And they have stories that are horrifying to me. And I think people read mine, and I've been told that people have cried all the way through my book. And that wasn't my intent. But I mean, if you make people feel something, I think you've done memoir right. And so I know I can see the writers in my class who have that ability even if the story sounds just awful, trauma, abuse in their childhood, whatever it might be. And then, then I have writers sometimes that get the story out, but it doesn't have that magic element of you really put it out there. And I don't know how to tell people how to do that. I think it's just either it's in you and it doesn't scare you to put it out there. And it doesn't bother me what people think about me because it's just my life. You can have whatever opinion you like. It doesn't change anything. But I know it's helping a lot of people. And somehow all of that in my brain just makes it okay. And I understand. I mean, I teach a lot of fiction, especially people who write fantasy. I feel like they really like to be removed. They want to be in a different world. They write about themselves. I see them echoed in their stories, but it's in a very different way that's almost like a weird distortion of their life. So they're still processing things, but it's not on the page for everyone to know.
From your professional background, did you ever sort of like, obviously working in psychology and looking at how people would have gone through trauma from an academic point of view, rather than your own personal life, did that ever sort of factor into your writing at all when you said your husband gave you the idea potentially for the blog to start doing it that way, but did you ever think when you came to sort of writing about the events that had happened in your life that there was a reason? Maybe was it a cathartic element in terms of being able to write about those things? And did you think about that from an academic sort of psychological point of view? And did that factor in at any point?
I think it absolutely does. I mean, there's a lot of ways that people process or don't process trauma, right? And grief, specifically, I think processing grief. And I think writing for me was maybe the main way. I mean, I went to therapy and I did all the more traditional things, but writing is a way to process events that happen in our world and to better, I mean, I think I always try to quote Joan Didion, and I do a terrible job, but she says, like, I write to better understand the world around me, what I see, what I hear. And I agree with that. When I write stuff, by the time I get to the end, and I don't always know why I'm writing the things I start off writing, but I end with some sort of understanding that I didn't have before I wrote it. And I don't think without writing, I would ever come to that. And that's not for everybody, of course. But I do think it is in that way cathartic. I know a lot of people say writing memoir is like therapy, which I mean, out of personal experience and after being a therapist, I would disagree. I mean, there's there's certain things about therapy, certain trained elements of therapy that's just not in writing. But the very personal process of especially spending time with a book where you spend, I mean, it took me a couple of years to write this book. And then it took a couple more years of edits and rereading. And you spend so much time on it that it does start to become part of your story and it helps you understand. And that's, I mean, I think you asked, part of the question was knowing that I put it on the page and maybe I don't think about it as much. That's true. I mean, other people are reading it and crying and I'm over here just doing my thing, like writing the next book. But it's because I think I've had my time to process and to come out and be like, oh, wow, that really was, that was a terrible time in my life, but look how great I am now. And I think that's a cool thing about memoir.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost the perfect point to move on to the second part of the show, which is what's the story. Where normally what we ask people to do is give us the elevator pitch, or you can read the back of the blurb or anything like that if you want to. So I'll play that video in a minute, but I'm just going to ask one more question in terms of, like, from your opinion, what do you think is the perfect amount of time in order to be able to reflect on a traumatic event? Because, you might say, in order to capture the event in its most authentic moment, writing or at least taking notes or whatever, maybe it's a diary form, and taking examples from that moment is probably the best way to sort of showcase that moment. But obviously it's also the hardest thing to do in terms of reflect on the trauma as you are going through the trauma, so to speak. So how do you know when enough time's passed for you to be able to reflect and then to be able to sort of analyze it and digest it and then be able to write about it?
Yeah, I think so. That answer, I would guess, is very personal for every writer. And everyone has their own answer to that. For me, I think so. A couple things that you brought up, I think, are really good points. For one, it does help to write things down closer to the time of whatever event it is in your life that you want to write about. And so a lot of people do keep diaries and journals, and those become great records for later on if you want to pull those out and use them to remind yourself of details and specifics that you would otherwise forget. So my blog served as that. The first manuscript that I wrote, that it really was, I think I wrote it probably a couple years after, I started the blog. I had all that as like documentation almost for when I went back to write Mosaic. I'm like, okay, I can go back, and if I don't remember what happened in this moment, I can go read about it. So I do think that's helpful to have kind of both, because I do think to get the emotion across and not like be too distant from our own writing, it does help to have time. And how much time, I think, really depends on the type of trauma and the person doing the writing. For me, it was probably a couple years. And then I felt like I could really start writing pieces. I wrote pieces for different websites, like parenting websites, like Scary Mommy, and The Mighty does a lot of mental health pieces. That's when I started writing those. And I was still working in psychology at the time, and I was starting to get my feet wet, like kind of moving beyond the blog. But that's when I could really start telling my story and not feel so sad or overcome with emotion that I could write it as just a writer and not get too entrenched in it. But it definitely helps to have notes or things documented somewhere, because memory fades, and it can make it harder to reconstruct later.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, obviously, most people that end up writing a memoir, they're probably not thinking, oh, at some point in my life, I'm going to write a memoir. They have to go through experiences that they feel other people will learn from and gain a benefit from reading about. So I'm guessing a lot of people are not thinking, oh, this is a really bad thing that's happening to me, I'm going to write a memoir about it.
Right.
But as you've said, taking, a diary or a journal, is going to be a good thing for your mental health in terms of getting it on the page anyway. And then, later down the line, if like yourself, you've got that love for writing that does come out, and you can potentially turn your experience into a memoir, then you've got some notes to go off. And like I said about that level of authenticity, if you're trying to think back to something without any notes, it'd be quite difficult to capture everything, because you're probably going to forget things because of the trauma and the experience that you're going through. And you would have key pinpoints, but having notes would definitely help. So massive benefits there. But we're going to go on to what's the story now. So I'm going to play a little video, and then when we get back from that, if you could give us the elevator pitch for Mosaic, that would be really, really good. So I'll play this little video, which is what's the story.
All right, so Mosaic is, on the surface, a story of about 5 or so years of my life, starting with the loss of my first daughter when I was 20 weeks pregnant. There were 2 more losses, and then my 4th pregnancy ending in my daughter, Evelyn, who's now 10 years old in 5th grade. But she was born 2 months early, and she has a genetic condition that causes low muscle tone. And so it's about becoming a mother through all of that, and then ending up being a mother, but in a way that was not expected and challenging, and how I navigated all of that. It's also a story that incorporates my own mental health throughout that, and kind of exploring generalized anxiety disorder and how that manifested through those years. It also explores relationships with family members, especially my mother, and how that influenced me being a mother, and how our relationship changed over the years, watching her become a grandmother. So that's the surface. I think at its heart, I would say Mosaic is about grief and loss and resilience and finding hope by moving through things, by processing grief and moving through to get to the next stage of life.
Yeah, people say in the comments, it sounds really engaging. Just when you were saying, obviously, with the description there, there's so many factors to it. I mean, I feel like people could write a memoir just on the relationship with their parents, or a memoir based around their mental health. And obviously, when you're looking at trauma as well, that could have been a book in itself. So what made you bring all those pieces together in one place?
It was not intentional at first. Actually, it was my first thought. So I had to come up with a thesis project idea for my graduate program. And my thought was to actually only write about my daughter Evelyn, because it was a difficult pregnancy with her, even though it ended, well. Having a premature baby was difficult. She was in the NICU for 5 weeks. Learning about her condition, which is pretty rare, and it kind of blindsided us a little bit, and how to deal with that. It's a lifelong thing that we're still learning how to help treat and help her along. That was my initial idea. And somehow, and I always tell my students this too, no matter what kind of book you're writing, no matter how much you plan, I think you need to leave avenues open for things that want to be in your book that you didn't think about. So as I was writing, I said, well, I can't really write about just my 4th pregnancy and Evelyn without talking about what happened to me before, especially because our first baby that passed away, we don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure she had the same condition that Evelyn had. So it's something genetic. And the second and third losses were early enough, but it could have also been the same genetic thing. So there was that tie. I'm like, I can't tell her story without telling the rest. The mental health piece too. I felt like I had to write about how that was all impacting me, because obviously having high anxiety. I mean, I've always been a high anxiety kind of person, but going through something like that doesn't help at all, especially dealing with the medical establishment. It was very difficult being a pregnant woman under very intense scrutiny all the time, especially after you have one loss, and then you have a second loss and a third loss. And it became very oppressive and very overwhelming. So I couldn't not write about my anxiety. And then I started noticing there were elements about my own childhood that were kind of mirrored in me being a parent to Evelyn once she was born, and some of her experience with the doctors, and how I had different things. I was born with scoliosis. And so I had a lot of orthopedic doctor visits, and I had a spinal surgery. And there were things about that mirrored things with Evelyn and the surgeries she's had. And she has an orthopedic surgeon. And so I felt like I started writing the parallels there. So that led to me writing more about my mom, and like, okay, how did she and I interact when I was a kid? And how do I interact with my daughter? And how does she interact with my daughter? And it became complex, which was a challenge for sure, to get the book cohesive enough to make sense to another person. But I love the complexity of it, because I think it shows that it's not just about pregnancy loss. It's not just, okay, I lost some pregnancies and I went through some hard times, but it's okay. It's no, these difficult things happened. I also dealt with a lot of anxiety, and it changed how I interacted with people in my world. And I think those things are so ubiquitous that I couldn't not, and they were so intertwined that I couldn't not include them all. That's how it kind of became Mosaic, and was like all these pieces coming together.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and he says in the comments, same anxiety here off the charts. Women are gaslit, and then I'll let people read that themselves. But yeah. So I suppose on the back of that, obviously, with you mentioning about your own anxiety before, obviously, these traumatic events that are happening as well in your life, and obviously before you're reflecting back on them, how big a part did that play when you were going through the actual experiences themselves? And could you feel that getting worse? I say worse,
Yeah.
is one anxiety sort of moment worse than another? I'm not too sure, but you get my idea in terms of, like, could you feel that increasing over time, and how did you sort of navigate that when you were in the moment?
Yeah, it absolutely got worse. I think so. These pregnancies happened pretty close together. I mean, there's 4 pregnancies in 5 years. So in the first one, we were completely blindsided that there was anything wrong with the baby until my 16-week ultrasound. We thought everything was fine. And then within 2 weeks, she was gone. So that's maybe the trauma that kicked off everything and was very shocking to us. After that, just the scrutiny that I talked about that they put me under, because of that first loss, like then I had to go in for a lot of extra appointments, a lot of extra blood work and testing. And every time you go, you think, oh my, is this going to be the time that there's no heartbeat? Is this going to be the time there's no heartbeat? And when you have that going in your head, that drives the anxiety. So that happened through the second pregnancy, that happened through the third pregnancy, got to the fourth pregnancy, and they were like, okay, now we're going to monitor you for more things and preterm labor. And it was off the charts with and I know the medical establishment is doing what they know how to do. And they're putting, every test they know, and they're trying to monitor everything. But for anyone, that would be too much. And for someone like me who has a hard time not ruminating and thinking back and living in the past and the present and wondering what's going to happen next and wondering if I could have done something better, it drove me to a point where I actually stopped going to some of the appointments. We got to a point where, so we were seeing regular doctors and the high risk maternal fetal medicine doctors. And I said, I cannot do both anymore. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it at the end. But for my own, I would have almost panic before going to appointments. My mother-in-law had to come to an appointment with me once because I couldn't bear to do another ultrasound to find out what was going to be wrong next or what they thought would be wrong, because there were things they thought were wrong that were fine. So definitely it ramped up to the point where I said, that's enough. We're going to deal with it as it comes. And that was maybe a saving moment for me. And that, unfortunately, because she was born early, that was only maybe a couple months worth of time where I had some peace, where I was like, I will be a regular pregnant woman. I go every, however many weeks you want me to come, but I'm not doing all the extra blood work and the tests. And that was, I think, critical for me. Because I thought I was going to lose it at some point. It was too much.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the incredible level of resilience that you're talking about here, in terms of obviously having one real significant trauma, and having to go through that multiple times with, as you said, multiple pregnancies within a 5-year period, and then a heightened level of appointment and observation and things like that. Do you know how you got through those moments? And obviously, do you explore that explicitly in the book?
I don't know if I ever explicitly explore that. I do include moments of the certain doctor's appointments, the ones that were really pinnacle and memorable for me. There's actually two doctors, and the two like the high risk. One was a cardiologist, and one was a high risk doctor. And I kind of pinned them against each other because the high risk doctor was terrible. After that appointment that I document in the book, I never saw him again because I just couldn't do it. But yeah, and then the cardiologist came in and said, "No, her heart's fine. What do you worry about?" There were moments like that I do document those appointments, and I think someone with super high functioning anxiety, I get through a lot. I can do a lot of things. People don't realize I have anxiety most of the time. I look calm, I sound calm, but inside I can be panicked. I think I would just kind of go in like a fog and just say, I just got to do it. I just got to get through it. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to let them do what they got to do, and I'm going to get out of here. And but you can only do that so many times. And then it starts to break down to the point where I would be in tears and I just couldn't go anymore. So, but yeah, I don't think too many of those, like I said, I think 2 of those appointments are in the book. Most of the time though, I think it's more about the in-between stuff. And then it moves on to the third part of the book, onto my daughter really. And when she was born early and what we had to do in the NICU, because that was a whole other new experience that we were not anticipating, having a 5-week hospital stay with her at all. So then everything shifted to her and her medical needs and what was going on with that, which is another kind of parental nightmare in a way. But at least it was off of me, because I think that was intense for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. Obviously, you've talked about your daughter and your relationship with your mum and how that developed, or has probably still developing. How was it with your partner in those moments when you were trying to move forward, but also still very much in pain from the past? And what did you do to help each other's sort of mental health in that space?
Yeah, I mean, so we worked very well together. We've just always been kind of a perfect match, I think. I write an essay in here called The Odds. And in it, I wanted to explore, because I knew that we had gotten through 4 losses, including a baby that was born alive and died, and a child who was born prematurely and we didn't know what was happening. Those are heavy things for couples to get through. And so I wanted to know more about how many couples actually survive things like this and how many end up breaking up. And, it's very common for couples not to stay together. And I think somehow the way we play off each other and the way we can support each other when the other one's breaking down just always works. And we did a year of therapy together, because I told him I think I need to just talk to someone, and he wanted to go along. So we worked that out together, and we could understand where each of us was coming from. There was never any blame or criticism between the two of us that we could have done anything different, or, we always respected each other and respected the process. And I think we both took the time to grieve, and it just worked, which is fantastic, because a lot of the appointments, and if he wrote a memoir, I tell him he should write a memoir about this time, because I would love to know his perspective on this, because he shows up in the book, but obviously it's from my perspective of how I see him. But I'm sure inside he was also dying to a degree to be the person watching all this, and there's nothing you can do. But he was always the one there for me. He was always the one that took me when I needed to go, and if I needed to get to the hospital, and he would listen to the information. He's a mathematician, so he's very analytical, and he can take in information and dispense it. And he was kind of that conduit for me, like, or conduit, maybe is a better word, like, between, especially if I was emotionally distraught. I think he could take it in. He could kind of detach from that to take in the stuff and help us work through it, which I know not everybody has that. And so I feel very fortunate that we have that dynamic and that it worked.
Yeah. Anya says, "Oh, that's so sweet, Mr. Anya," and I feel the same about one. Brilliant. I mean, even just listening to it there, I feel like you said, a lot of couples wouldn't survive the experiences that you've been through. And again, maybe I know you've written a memoir, but maybe there's a book for couples out there, because, if you've clearly got that relationship, I know it's difficult sometimes to pick a relationship that just works and pick it apart and go, well, why does this just work? Yeah. But yeah, maybe that's something that you could do together in the future. And like you said, hearing his side of things and his perspective would be great, because again, I don't think there's many books out there that are about these experiences, but from the male perspective as well. And obviously everyone would be going through this as a pair anyway. And like you said, a lot of readers have reached out to you and said about their experiences. And I should imagine, yeah, you've got both sides of the coin there. So yeah, maybe you should push him a little bit more.
I will. He used to be a writer before his math career. He was into writing and journalism and such. So I'll keep trying.
Yeah. So we've got about 15 minutes left of the show, which is normally when we go into the community questions time. So if you're watching now, send your questions in for Laura, and I'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. But I'm just going to play a little video, which is community questions. So we'll just wait for some questions to pop in, but we will ask some of the staple questions that we ask on the show. So one of the first ones is, if you could take any character for fiction and make that character your own, maybe if you could write the memoir for a fictional character, to switch it up a little bit, which character would you pick and why? What would you do with them?
So I was thinking about this, and I've been reading a lot of fiction lately, because the book I'm writing right now is fiction, and I tend to read the genre that I'm writing in. And so I just read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which is a great book. And the librarian, Miss Louise Elm, was a fascinating character. And I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't read it yet, because I think people should go out and read it. But she was fascinating to me because she played kind of a dual role, right? She was like, and she was very symbolic to the main character. She was kind of the foil to like the main character, and she was always the person kind of pushing the main character through the whole book. But there was both the real Miss Elm and then like this, we don't know, Miss Elm, like maybe an imaginary Miss Elm, maybe a different realm Miss Elm. And so I really like that concept. I would maybe pick someone like her. And now the idea of writing her memoir would be fascinating too, because she was complex, but I think not drawn out in the book, because the book wasn't about her per se. But she would be fun because I think she had a lot of so she was the school librarian for this main character when the character was a child, but she also had her own issues with her home life. So it's like she was really supportive to the kids at school, but then she had like this background, this mysterious background where she didn't know, like, I guess her family kind of disowned her and didn't like her. And I was very curious about that. So maybe her memoir would be fascinating.
Yeah, definitely would. I love when you get side characters and the writer brain just goes off and you think, oh, what's their backstory like? And
yeah.
Like it. Maybe Matt Haig will let you do that. So Anya's got a question. She says, what is your favorite post-apocalyptic dystopian book?
Well, another good question, because I'm reading a lot of them now to prep for my class. I just read Station 11, which by Emily St. John Mandel. That was fabulous. And I was impressed with, so just I'm finding post-apocalypse. I mean, obviously post-apocalypse, always kind of the same story, right? Some big thing happens, most people die, and then you end up with these cultures of groups of people trying to survive. But somehow in Station 11, she really played with the storyline and weaving together, which I think I'm fascinated with, which is why I like to write stories that thread line or storylines together. So she has different characters, different storylines, different times before the virus came and after the virus came. And so that might have been my favorite one that I've read, but I've read some really good. I mean, The Road by Cormac McCarthy is always classic, and that's good. The Crossing by Jason Mott is another good one that I'll be teaching. So, but yeah, Station 11 was really good. Yeah,
it was a good shout. Yeah, and you did say great book. Loved the HBO. So yeah, it's good when you're a teacher and you can get a TV adaptation of something as well for kids to get into a little bit. Some modern students, I say modern, that's not making me sound really old, but they like to be able to see it on the screen. But yeah, the next question that we have is, if you could take the ending to any fictional story, what would you change and why?
Yeah, so this one's hard for me because I tend to not dislike endings. I know there's a lot of people who don't like endings to books or movies or TV series, and they get all upset. I was just talking to my husband about Lost. I know, again, this is maybe dating me a little bit. Lost is a few years back, but people were so enraged by how Lost ended, and I was fine with it. I think maybe though, because here's the thing: as a writer and a writing teacher, I think a lot about beginnings and endings, and I can tell by the time we are consumers of books and movies and TV shows, those writers have also given a lot of thought to beginnings and endings. And I think some viewers want a neatly wrapped up ending, and I'm just used to that's just not how it goes. So I'm okay with that. I think what I have more issue with maybe is when they take books and try to make them into movies. If I can change your question a little bit. I mean, to me, that's where I feel opinionated. Like I like Gone Girl. I liked the book a lot. And then the movie was like, well, it didn't quite achieve what the book did. To me, that's where like I think things don't quite translate well. But endings, I'm generally Seinfeld. Seinfeld might be the one TV series I was like, that was kind of a letdown because it was so big. But books, I honestly cannot think of a book that I would change the ending to.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm just going to go back to your own writing for a minute in terms of beginnings and endings, because when you're writing a memoir, you said it was about 4 or 5 years of my life. How do you decide when you're writing about your own life when the beginning is and when the end is for that book?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I get that a lot because I think people get confused with like autobiography and memoir, or even celebrity memoir, the Trevor Noah book that came up in the comments. Celebrity memoirs are interesting, but they do fall maybe a little bit more on the autobiography side, right? Like they kind of tell you the full life from I mean, I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, and it was like, I was born in Chicago and I lived in the South Side. I went to this school. And memoir doesn't generally do that. Nobody wants to know where I was born and what school I went to, because I'm not that interesting of a celebrity. So yeah, choosing that container for the memoir can be tricky. I think of it less, I guess, of like the years. Sometimes it's the years of life, but sometimes it's just when the main event began and when you feel like maybe like emotionally you resolved something about that. And so like when I stopped writing Mosaic, it was pretty close to the actual time in my life, but there was time that went on. I mean, I stopped writing when Evelyn was about 4, I think is the last time in the book. And by the time it was published, she was 9. So there were things that happened after that I could have kept going. But emotionally, all the threads felt like the actual story arcs came to some sort of resolution, even if it wasn't complete. And the emotional threads came. And then when they all kind of complete at the same point, you're done. And it's not the most clear. It's hard to sometimes tell, and you just have to keep writing until you feel that moment.
Mm. How does it feel then, knowing that obviously friends and family, like friends and family, maybe not so much, like obviously with your daughter, she can read about that exact moment in your life when she's older.
Yeah. And
Has it ever sort of had any weight in your mind as to the fact that she can do that? And like, I know obviously a stranger reading your work, some of them may come up to you and go, oh my God, just, your story really inspired me and things like that. And that's great in a moment in time, but then they're gone again. You're probably never going to see them again. But
right.
with somebody who's there on a regular basis and is a big part of your life, obviously them having a window, which is not like, it's not like looking at a photograph or a picture. It's your thoughts and feelings and experiences of that time. So does that bear any weight onto your mind when you release this book?
Maybe somewhat, but I don't know, because the thing with memoir too, and I think maybe this is where when I get especially newer memoir writers into my classes, I think they have to like spill their guts on everything. They have to say everything that's happening and every emotion they have. And really you open that curtain when you want people to see things, and you close the curtain when you don't want them to see things. And so, and my curtain stays open a lot. I mean, I'm, like I said, I'm not afraid to share. I'm a pretty open person. We're a pretty open family in terms of communicating about this. I know maybe, even 1 or 2 generations back, people didn't talk about the loss of a child or pregnancy loss. And even now it's hard for people to discuss that, or they get dismissed, or they feel too embarrassed. And within my family, including like my parents and my sister and my husband and his family, and with our daughter, it's always been very open. And there's no shame. I've never felt shame or embarrassed by it. And I don't want her to feel that way either. I want her to know she had a sister, and she does. She's always known, and she's always known that her sister likely had the same condition that she has. And so there's no secrets, I guess, that I'm afraid she's going to learn in terms of it coming from such a deep place. So it is. I mean, when you write, it's a little deeper than just when you're telling a story. So there is that. And I know there's things that family members have said, oh, I didn't realize that about you, or I didn't know you thought that, and that's fine though. I mean, I think that means that I've done a good job. If I can surprise people who know me the best with little things, that means that I've dug deep enough. And and Evelyn's read a lot of the book actually, and she's heard me read it. And she's just excited she's in a book, to be honest.
So we've got about 7 minutes left, roughly. So if you're watching now and you've still got questions and you want to send them in, then please do, and I'll answer those. Well, I won't answer them. Laura will, but I'll ask the questions. One of our final sort of staple questions that we have is, again, it's a little bit morbid, but you're looking back at your writing career on your deathbed. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
I think so. This is fascinating that you're asking this now, because I was just kind of reflecting, not that I'm on my deathbed, but I'm already reflecting on this, especially as a writer, as someone that's a creative, like I think any creative field, it's really hard to pinpoint when you've made it. When have you been successful? Because you're always seeing what other people are doing, and you're seeing the success of like books that are on bestseller lists and that are getting mentioned in reviews and different things. And you're like, well, my book's not. And so there have been moments since the book came out in March that I have been pretty down about it. I'm like, oh, I didn't sell that many books, or I didn't get this review, or whatever. And so I started thinking about, like, well, what did I want, especially when I switched careers? What did I want? And what I wanted was to have a book published by a traditional press, and I have that. I wanted to teach writing to other people. I do that. I wanted to help people finish their books through coaching. I do that. So I'm like, I think I am successful, actually. It's just not always what we imagined. I think it, especially like being an author, can be often glamorized. It's hard work. And I don't, no one can prepare you. It's like becoming a parent. No one can actually prepare you for how hard it is. Especially because a lot of the promotion and stuff is just me. I'm booking things, I'm finding things, I'm going to things, I'm paying for things, giving talks, like, and so I think if it can feel like you're not successful, but I think looking back, even just looking at it now, I'm like, no, I've hit all the marks, and it can get better. Like I have 2 more books that I'm trying to put out in the world, and I still have things with Mosaic to promote, and I still have classes to teach and other writers to help. Like, it's just going to grow and get better. So that's what so it's interesting you asked that, because I was just reflecting on that, because it's easy to get trapped under the thoughts of like, this book is not successful. It's not on the New York Times bestseller list. And that's not true.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important thing to remember, in terms of like, remember the things that you wanted to achieve and keep reminding yourself that you did achieve those things. Because, you know, I've saw it myself when we've been to festivals with some really, you know, they're on the New York Times bestsellers list, and they're up there, and they've got their own complaints. And I feel like even when you get success to that level, in terms of like monetary success, or, you know, fame for writing book, people still have the same issues and problems, if not slightly different ones. So if you can't concentrate on the successes that you've had, you're always going to focus on the negatives. And if you do that, you're not going to enjoy the experience. I had a sit-down conversation with a best-selling author, and I was chatting to him about it, and I was a little bit tipsy at the time, and I just said, can I just ask, like, about the money situation, because you're really interested as a writer, especially if you're trying to make money as a writer and be in that sort of space and, you know, provide for your family. I just said, can I just ask, like, how much you make as like a bestseller? And he was like, oh, I don't worry myself with that. I just write the next book. And his wife was like, yeah, that's exactly what he does. He just writes the next book. Like, he didn't even ask about the finances. And she told me, and I was like, what? Like, and I thought, if I was in his position, because it was like over $100 grand a month, and I thought, if I knew that I was earning that amount of money from the next book potentially, and if it didn't do well, that money could disappear. The pressure that would put me under on that next book would probably sink me. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So it's one of those things. Maybe, you know, the best way to do it at all levels and at all points is just to go, I'm just doing this book, and that's so whatever happens will happen, and I'll let that happen. Yeah. So we've got a couple of minutes left. If anyone's got any more questions, just send them in. And yeah, before we do go, Laura, can I ask you to share all your sort of details in terms of where people can find you on social media and things like that?
Absolutely. So I do have a website. It's just lauragaddis.com. Nice and simple. And everything on there, I think, will link you to my social media, but I am on Instagram at Laura Gaddis Writer. I also do write a Substack, and I do maybe one every month or two, where I just kind of update people on what I'm doing, my book tour and such. And that's Life of a Writer. And that's just at Laura Gaddis. Those are kind of the 2 big places that I'm on social media. And like I said, my website's a great place. I have all my articles and links and book coaching information, and on social media, it's all on lauragaddis.com.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that. So yeah, if you're watching this back, or you're listening to the podcast, Obviously, Laura's just given us all that wonderful information there as well. Obviously, if you resonated with her story as well, then go out and buy it. We'll put links into the description of the show when Chris Haggart does all that when he gets back. But yeah, it's been fantastic to chat to you, Laura. And yeah, I'll end the show now unless there's anything else or any advice that we want to say.
No, just keep going. If you're a writer, you can't stop. It's a relentless field. You just have to keep writing and keep trying and keep submitting and doing whatever you got to do, and just you'll get there. But yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It's been fantastic to chat to you. Really good advice there as well. And, the resilience and the fact that you've managed to share your story with the world as well is fantastic, because, as you said already, so many people resonating with your story and getting an awful lot from it. So, thank you on behalf of them for doing that as well.
Of course.
Yeah, we look forward to all the things that you do in the future as well. So from me, I'm going to end the show now, but thank you very much for tuning in and listening or watching this live with us. And yeah, we'll be back next week, same time next week, with another show. So please check out our socials for that, and you'll see who's with us next week. But from myself and Laura, it's goodbye, and we hope you all have a brilliant weekend and lots of writing gets done, or reading, or just relax if you want to do that. But yeah, whatever you're doing, I hope you have a fantastic time doing it. So it's goodbye from me. Thank you, everyone.